breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe. He's James. And we're going to do something a bit different today. We're going to answer some questions posed to us by you, our faithful listeners.
Yeah, so another Q&A question episode, which is great. I really like the switching up the format a bit and answering some of these questions. So what we're going to do, Kobe, I'm going to toss the first question at you. What do you do when the founder or business owner is just too stressed out to invest in solving business issues?
So this is something that we've been kind of seeing more and more and talking about more and more with some of the partners and collaborators that we
Yeah.
work with. And I think, and this question is really kind of more about addressing that issue than anything else, because I mean, kind of going back to the episode we did a couple episodes ago about transformation fatigue and burnout. It's the idea that, there's a bit of, like sometimes people are too stressed out, too burned out from all the need for all this constant change that they're just tired of it. There's that. It's something that's, is a difficult situation when businesses, that are well equipped to handle stuff, but they're just like, you know what, I'm exhausted. We want to move beyond this problem. That's what we talked about with
Yeah.
transformation fatigue. But something that we're also seeing that's just as damaging and surprisingly just as common is when the founders are almost like, you know, dealing with, well, let's be serious. Business owners and founders right now are dealing with a pretty stressful time economically.
Yeah.
So a lot of them who are just, they're feeling really stressed by internal and let's be serious, a lot of external factors. And that stress is causing them to have a block on how they, can deal with pertinent, like core issues that are putting the business at risk, but they're too stressed out mentally, too like out of their depth, with all this coming at them to actually like, be able to kind of focus, kind of put on a cool head and actually tactically invest time, effort, and resources into solving major business issues. And this is something that is a little bit more about kind of a almost like an unfamiliarity with
Yeah.
with some of the how do you take this focus and deal with these longer term issues, think longer term, and it is a major problem that we're definitely seeing in a lot of different businesses.
Well, I think it'd be helpful to get into a little bit of an example, but I think first, um, really what we're talking about is the outcome or what happens when you do not address things like the technical founder paradox. We've talked about the technical founder paradox many times on the show, but really what we're talking about is there comes a point in pretty much every business owner, entrepreneur, founder's journey where the skills that made them very successful early on in starting the business and growing it, if those skills do not change and adapt, it's what's going to keep them back from being able to take their business to the next level. And that's what we're seeing a lot of. It's a people getting themselves into situations where they are in unfamiliar territory. It's in a domain that they don't have the bench strength in, and they have not done the prerequisite work along their journey to either build the capacity to address these issues or to find somebody who can augment their skills and delegate those responsibility to somebody who understands and is able to address them. So really, this is a continuation of that technical founder paradox that we see in virtually every entrepreneur or business owner hits at some point in their journey. And hitting the technical founder paradox is not in and of itself a negative. We all have limitations in our skills. We all have certain pieces that we are very good at, and that's what we tend to build our businesses around. If we fail to expand our skill sets as founders, then we are going to hit a wall where we run out of problems that can be solved with our current skill set.
Yeah, and so I think that I'll just kind of quickly kind of point people if this idea of dealing with stressed out managers is something that you're dealing with, you want to learn more, like we said, about transformation fatigue. I'll put the episode, it was a couple episodes ago, but I'll put the episode number in the show notes. And then we did an episode solely on the technical founder paradox, so I'll put that episode listed there too. But you're 100% right. This is about them, often they have like domain specific expertise to what the businesses provide that but they don't have the competency in financial forecasting in kind of like in kind of the investments required for sustainability, like those
In
types of
people management, in all of these, I mean, if you are an expert in marketing
Mhm.
and you want to start your own business, you're probably going to start a business. You're going to open a marketing agency, right? It makes sense. That's
Yeah,
where your strengths lie. If
right.
you are a phenomenal cook, then
Mhm.
you may start a restaurant, right? We
Right.
build businesses based on the skill sets that we have,
Right.
but nobody can do everything themselves.
Right.
And
Especially when you hit a certain scale.
well, exactly. And nobody should be expected to carry all of that weight themselves. And
Mhm.
yet founders still put all of the responsibility on themselves.
Yeah.
And you cannot, very, very few people
Hmm.
can change and adapt and grow and to build a requisite knowledge in all of the different facets of business growth and management to
Right.
be able to do it by themselves. Can it be done? Yeah, there are brilliant people out there who are a hell of a lot smarter than I am. But is it regularly done? No.
No. No, you're right. And the thing too is that the, you know, the stress that business founders and owners feel when they're in this area outside their domain specific expertise is really what we're talking about. And usually it's in the, and usually it's, in the problems they're dealing with are outside their domain specific issues. So they almost have two kind of areas of stress. The like the domain that the weakness or the risk is in, like whether it's, they're not bringing enough customers in, so there's a marketing and sales
Mhm.
issue, whether it's a, they have major turnover issue, so it's a people management issue, or whatever it is. There's that area that they're unfamiliar with. But if they haven't built another skill set about again financial management and financial forecasting, then the ability to invest in having someone help you or purchase or wisely purchase or partner or whatever it is with someone who can solve those first sets of
Mhm.
issues, that's another area of stress. And this is, I think, is where we're seeing a lot of businesses they they even have people because again we work with a lot of partners and consultants who are the person that can help them solve the area that they're struggling with, but the business owners are like, well, we can't invest in that because money's tight, or or
Yeah.
we're losing customers, so we can't invest in the issues that we're having. And the problem is when the issues are around turnover or they're around customer acquisition, they're like, we can't. It's almost like they're saying we can't afford to bring in new customers because we don't have enough customers,
Yeah.
right? And that's really kind of where this stuff kind of falls. It's this idea of they're too stressed out to invest in solving their issue, and so the problems become secular, and they end up being kind of how you kind of dig a hole for yourself you can't get out of.
Yeah, and I mean the conversation that was the where this question came up and was the catalyst for this question. I mean the person was working with a business and helping them to build their marketing,
Right.
and had proven had the leads, the conversions, the customer acquisition had increased steadily over the time that they had been working with them, with
Mhm.
the time that our contact had been working with their client. Um, and yet they were their customer retention was what was killing them. They weren't able to actually keep people long term. So it was just trying to pour more money into a leaky bucket. But the work was being done, the work was actually making a significant difference.
Hmm.
And what they needed to invest in was figuring out how do we actually hang on to people once we attract them.
Hmm.
But because the cash flow, they weren't willing to invest in the
Yeah.
retention.
Well, and that was what was so funny was so our contact was saying, yeah, so we've been having these great campaigns, we've been converting these great leads, we're bringing in, like 20 new customers a month, but they're losing 15.
Yeah.
So there's still a net positive gain, but the problem is that, I don't know, I don't have access to the tools I need to figure out how do we cut that 15 down to say 7.
Yeah.
And they went to back to the founder with a pretty small ask of can we have here's a small budget with these tools we can actually start to kind of cut that retention number down. And they were shocked that the business owner was like, we're a little too cash strapped for that right now, so just keep trying to bring customers in.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, for how long? Right? Like how long do you expect to kind of keep this, bailing out this leaky boat, right? But it was the founder was just, but they were just so stressed they couldn't see past the very, very first step of coming in with me for money, and we're cash strapped, so we can't invest in anything, even if that thing that we're investing in is the thing that will free up money, right? It's a tough place to be in.
It is. And I do empathize with the founder. I mean, it is money is always what keeps you up at night, right?
Absolutely.
It's and cash flow is a major consideration. I mean, you have dozens and dozens of employees who rely on you for their livelihood. You've
Yeah.
got customers and clients who rely on you for the goods or services that you're producing.
Hmm.
There's a lot of stress that comes with it. The problem goes back to what we talked about of this is an area that the founder doesn't have a lot of real technical expertise in understanding how all of these pieces are interconnected and rely on each other, and just addressing one can help in the short term, but for long-term growth, you need to actually not just attract fix the attraction of new customers, you need to also, for their particular business model, you need to hang on to them
Yeah.
because it's not a one and done single
Right.
purchase model. It's
Right.
a
Well, this business lives and dies on the lifetime customer value,
absolutely.
right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, in those kind of businesses, the like retention is so vital. But I mean, that's really not that different from what we kind of see on a regular basis, where we'll have businesses bring us in to do kind of an early diagnostic, help them identify their issues, and then we'll say, okay, so you have, so like you have some, major employee retention issues. And they're like, well, we're kind of used to that, so we've invested in, like better recruitment and better this, and it's almost like they accepted the churn as just
Yeah.
standard operating procedures, and we're like, well, it doesn't have to be. If you could divert, if you shifted away and spent a little bit more on retention, you wouldn't have to invest so much in having such a great attraction program. But the idea of like, like, well, this is how we do business. I'm too like, I'm too like flustered to
This is
rethink.
one of the 4,700 other things on my plate right now.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, part of it is legitimately there's a lot that needs to be done to keep a
yeah,
business operating and growing.
right.
And especially in smaller organizations, it more and more rests on the founder or the leader.
Yeah.
And so breaking through that, you know, that need to focus just on what can I do today,
Hmm.
because while that is very important that the day to day gets taken care of, if you are just have your head down, blinders up, and you're focusing on just what's in front of you today, you're going to land yourself in the ditch. You're
Yeah.
going to walk right off a cliff or walk into the ditch
Mhm.
because you're not taking the time to look up and actually see where you're going and make a plan. Right? It's the idea that you need, at some point, you have to stop working in your business and start working on your business.
Absolutely. And then to go back and answer the question of what do you do when your founder is too stressed to invest in solving business issues? I think a lot of it is the founder needs to develop a level of comfort and confidence in the financial planning, in the financial management, and even in the areas where they're struggling, and the risk is. And the way that they can do that is a few different ways. And again, this is kind of going back to the episode we talked about the technical founder paradox. It's about building the competency yourself, or it could be about bringing in a team that you can trust that will allow you to kind of help you through it. You have to be open to developing the comfort and confidence. And I think, and third thing, you need to start focusing on the business and less in the business, because again, if we're too stressed out to invest in solving our issues are what take us down.
And it can be really, really difficult to place trust in other people,
Mhm.
um, especially around key aspects of your business. If you're used to doing it all yourself or
Yeah,
holding a lot of these responsibilities, yeah, it can be a significant challenge to kind of delegate that and empower. It's not just about delegating. It's
yeah.
about, if you're going to delegate, you need to actually delegate the authority along with the responsibilities.
Wow, that's a quote right there. You have to delegate the authority as well as the
Yeah.
responsibilities to solve the issues. Is something that I think most people go, oh yeah, you need both those
Oh,
things.
yeah. You can't just tell somebody to do
Yeah. Hey,
something and not give
intern.
them the
Oh,
authority to do it. I
yeah,
mean, that's a great way to just piss people off.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, hey, intern, unpaid intern, you're responsible for figuring out our fiscal solvency over the next 5 years. Good luck. Like, like yeah. But I do think, though, the one area that we probably could dig into a little bit more, and maybe this is an idea for an upcoming episode, is about how do you almost like create a bit of that comfort and confidence, or reframing how you understand the financial planning of your business so that you do feel like you're in a position where you can invest in solving your issues.
Yeah, it would be nice to do maybe a full episode on kind of the practical steps that a founder can go through
Yeah.
to,
Or at least better understanding where some of your money is could be redivested, or yeah. I think that might be something for us to think
yeah.
about doing an
Maybe we
upcoming.
should actually plan the episode off camera, but
Yeah. We'll try that for a change. But yeah, so hopefully that us talking about kind of like the different kind of where it comes from and kind of like how you need to develop comfort and confidence might it is enough of an answer for this specific question. But I do think it's something that people should be really starting to ask ourselves. How do we see this problem, but how do we actually address it? So
yeah, it's common enough that it's worth its own
yeah,
piece.
cool. All right, so let's move on to the next question. I'll ask this one to you.
Okay.
All right, so question number two. How do you build trust with employees?
Well, we just talked about trust, didn't we?
Well, we've talked about a few things, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, so trust is huge, and it's a funny thing. It's If it's been broken, it can be extremely difficult to build back.
right.
Um, and if you as a leader have been burned in the past, you may be very reluctant to actually trust others because it has blown up in your face. But trust is the only way that you're going to get that delegation is actually going to work. If you don't want to do everything yourself, you have to trust that other people are capable of doing the work, right? So, how do you actually build that trust? Honestly, the best method that we have come across for the early stages is a combination approach. It's creating very clear expectations with people. We've talked about setting and managing expectations dozens of times. It's It's central to so much. And if you build that skill, that's going to help you in every situation. But specifically with trust, you need to have very clear expectations of what people are responsible for, what they are allowed, and what they are allowed and not allowed to do. So, one of the projects that we're doing right now is very closely aligned with building some trust and authority in a leadership team. And the methodology that we've been using is creating very clear expectations through detailed job descriptions. So, what not just your basic job description of, here's a general overview of your responsibilities, but actually going into what is the intended impact of this role? What does success look like in
Mhm.
this role?
Right.
How are we going to measure success in this role?
Yeah.
Those expectations are critical if you want to build trust with people. They need to know what's expected of them, what success looks like, and what they're going to be measured against. So that is the first critical piece that needs to be in place.
Yeah, and I think like it too, like the idea of this trust is a two-way street. Like there are a lot of leaders that feel like they can't fully trust their employees, but I would say there's a lot
Well,
more
if you are the
employees.
leader, your responsibility is to lead
Right,
and trust first.
right. So, well, I would say a better way to put that is your job as a leader is to trust but verify, right?
Yes.
So, but I mean, the idea of like, a lot of employees feel that that their leaders have broken trust. We see that all the time, and
Hmm.
often when we go in and we have to fix kind of organizational like culture issues, usually the trust is one of the core tendencies of what went wrong. And a lot of times it's that employees they don't feel like they can trust or even kind of like let their guard down
Hmm.
around their supervisor, around their manager. And that's kind of where the fundamental breakdown of most things kind of happen. And, and this is a kind of a case of what you referred to as kind of the project that we're working on now with the leadership team. But part of it is it really goes back to, like you said, kind of what you were saying is transparency. It's
Yeah.
the idea of building a sense of like, again, good job description seems like a weird, almost like lame answer to how to build trust. But like when we say that, we say when you think about our traditional job description, throw that out the window. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a document that's almost like a core foundational piece that should be part of how the employee understands their job, their role. It should be what they're referring back to on a regular basis, not what they're looking at when they sign the contract and they put into a file and never
Yes.
see again. Because again, how success is measured, what success looks like, the intended impact, where your levels of authority are. This is what kind of creates this clear, transparent, like fence for you to work in. It's like,
Yeah.
and the idea of like, if you know all these things, if you know how things are what you're going to be held to and what you're expected to deliver on, and what success truly looks like, not just what success looks like different day to day, different manager to manager, what success will almost like, empirically look like.
Hmm.
That's something that level of transparency makes it a lot easier for the employee to go, okay, I know what's expected of me. So it's easier for me to kind of trust the process because the process could not be more clear.
Yeah, and it needs to be integrated clearly into your performance management process as well and framework.
Exactly.
But the second part of that really is like the job descriptions are critical, but you also need to develop. It doesn't need to be as formal as this, but we use a framework of professional limitations, which sets the rules for what people are not allowed to do. It's all framed from, it's honestly, they're all framed from the negative. They're the thou shall not, right?
Right.
So in leadership positions, maybe there's a certain amount of money that you can spend, that you have some budgetary discretion, and so the maybe that threshold's $10,000. So the limitation would be framed around, you shall not spend more than X amount without approval from whatever person, right? It just really goes through and sets the, as Kobe, you were saying, it sets that fence around what you're allowed to do. Because
Hmm.
if you know what's expected of you and how success is going to be measured, and you're told, here are the things that we don't want you to do, everything else is up for grabs,
Right.
right? It actually, by creating these limitations, it creates more freedom. By
Mhm.
providing people with some freedom in how they do their job, you can show that you trust them. So these things are interconnected, stumbling
Mhm.
over my words, um, but they're critical to actually answering the question of how do you build trust. You can actually create a framework
Right.
that builds trust.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is that most people think that the biggest cause of broken trust between employees and employers is betrayal.
Hmm.
Now, betrayal is definitely a
It
common
happens.
thing. It happens, but I would go as far and be as bold to say it is by far not the biggest culprit. I think the biggest culprit to eroding trust between employees and employers is expecting that employees figure stuff out on their own with little direction, like mind reading, and the realities of inconsistency. I think
Yeah.
those are the big two. So a lot of we say, how do you build trust with employees? What you need to do fundamentally is you need to remove guesswork, and you need to like systematically remove inconsistency.
Yeah.
And that's really the big two. And what you were saying about job description and professional limitations is a very practical, tangible way to achieve that. It's not simple. It's not, it's something that,
It's not going to be quick.
no, and we don't recommend you listening to this goes, oh, these are the two things. I'm gonna go do this on my own. I'd recommend against that. But I mean, it's something that this is where this stuff needs to kind of come from, is you need to create this transparent, clear process into your standard operating procedures, into your performance management systems, into all the stuff that you do. It needs to be like woven into kind of your fundamental HR systems and processes because that's where because trust is not usually broken with a big betrayal. It's usually starts cracking with
Yeah.
expecting guesswork and inconsistency, and then eventually enough straws break the camel's back, and that's when trust usually goes away in most cases.
I'm glad you brought that up because even just thinking back on experiences in my own career, the times when I have been most angry or felt betrayed or ticked off at my boss or whomever has been instances exactly of that. It's go do this thing with very little direction or authority or whatever. And then you do the thing to the best of your knowledge and professional judgment,
Judgment, yeah,
and you get penalized for it.
right,
Well, you didn't do it exactly the way that I wanted you to. Well, then you should have told me how you wanted it done,
right,
right? Like
yeah.
that, but legitimately, you're
Mhm.
right. That's how trust erodes over time.
Yeah.
So if we can remove some of that guesswork and make sure that expectations are very clearly articulated and that people know how they're going to be measured for success,
Mhm.
man, it makes things so much easier when it's done properly.
Yeah, well, and what's funny is that, one of the things that we always enjoy doing when clients bring us in to kind of do some early diagnostics and to kind of help them and find some of their core issues. Usually one of the first things that we tear apart is their performance management system and their job
Mhm.
descriptions and that kind of stuff. Because of this. Because we largely say kind of stuff, this is where this is where we think we should start because this is where the trust is eroding the fastest. And without the trust, all of your big goals are
Yeah.
completely impossible. And it's one of those things where it's so common that there's this similar situation in most businesses that again the simple diagnostics, identifying the major issues, to identify the gaps, kind of say here's the plan forward. It's not an easy process, but it's uncomplicated and it's surprisingly consistent. So like this is something that we always say with most businesses, if you want to actually start to build the trust, something as simple like our process of sorry, like our diagnostics to assess your processes really are where the effective, long-lasting change comes from.
Yeah.
All right,
You want to
yeah, let's
jump
move
into the
on.
next one?
Sure.
All right. So the next question is, what is the connection between customer retention and employee retention?
Right. That is a good question. And I remember when this question got asked, and it was something that was, it's funny because most of the time people have a pretty kind of like, superficial or not superficial. I think that's a bit reductive. They've got a kind of a clear picture in their mind, but the picture is very limited on, well, obviously you need employees to serve customers. So there's obviously a connection. Like, again, kind of at that surface level. But I think that the question that we often bring to the conversation is that makes that question a little bit less of an obvious, well, duh, employees are the ones that serve customers, is kind of is to dig a little bit deeper. We often ask the question, well, who delivers your value proposition?
Hmm.
What is the impact of all of your employees on the customer experience? Because because not every employee in every business has the exact same impact on customer retention. Because again, some employees have a much greater impact on retaining a single customer than others, right? So one of the things that we often like to kind of tie it to is when you're thinking about that connection between customer retention and employee retention, is to really kind of figure out, like, what type of business model, customer experience model that you operate with, should, and that it should really tell you about how vital your employee retention, your employee experience is toward your customer retention in your customer experience.
Yeah, I think I want to jump on the idea of who delivers your value prop, because that's an interesting way to reframe the question that I think there's a lot of value in exploring. So, well, I mean, we've worked just going through some of the different types of companies that we've worked with over the years. We've worked with private educational institutes, and I mean, a single teacher in a classroom has a massive impact on delivering the value proposition of the company to the students, right? It's all about the quality of the curriculum, the
Mhm.
quality of the instruction, the activities. So, in terms of who delivers the value proposition, I would say like 80 to 90% of the value proposition of the company is reliant on the individual in that classroom delivering value,
Yeah, and,
right?
I'd say like account managers. We work with businesses that have a lot of like their sales, like, their sales is done through a specific account managers. They're
Yeah.
probably in the same boat too, right?
Yeah, like I mean, even looking at businesses that we engage with, like there's software that we use in our business that we have account managers, and the software is a huge part, like it is a huge part of their value proposition,
Mhm.
right? The software itself is probably more like 70% of the value proposition, but the account manager still has a big impact. And like, I'm thinking about this in our case because fortunately we've got a great account manager
Mhm.
who has been really responsive and accommodating when we have questions. They're right there. They're walking us through things. So while even in a software business, you would
Mhm.
think well, our value proposition is the quality of our software. The impact that that account manager has on my satisfaction with your software is pretty significant. I love the technology,
Mhm.
and it's a great tool that we use in our business. But there's still, I mean, I'm contrasting that with a teacher where like 80% might rest on them, and 80% might rest on this software, but there's still a significant human element in play.
Yeah. Well, and I would actually say that I would disagree with you a little bit on I think the account manager probably has in the short term I would say that's probably 80% of your value proposition is actually with the account manager because especially during the onboarding system or when you're familiarizing yourself with it, every piece, I mean, you and I are very tech savvy. We do a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
tech in our work. But I mean, are awkward and ham-fisted using new software like everyone else is when you first start out, and it's experience with the account managers that make that help build the confidence and that familiarity, the learning curve, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say over the like the long term, the I would say it's like 80% account manager, 20% software until you hit a kind of a certain point when you've developed kind of mastery with it, then that probably reverses.
Right. I mean,
But
as I become more comfortable in
yeah,
using the software and I'm more familiar with it, I'm going to rely on them less. My interactions with them will be less, and
yeah.
therefore the delivery of value proposition is going to be less. Yeah,
Right.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. But I would say like teachers, in this case, account managers, even like brokers, like, like we've done some work with kind of different corporations and different organizations that have like brokers and stuff too. But
Hmm.
even those that we've worked with, even our brokers who were the customers, they are vital to the customer retention. Like, and we kind of refer to that as like single impact retention, right? Because it's about this single teacher, this single broker, this single account manager. They deliver the most, the most critical employee experience is them. So when we say about that connection, so losing that teacher, that broker, that account manager is devastating to your customer retention,
Yeah.
right? So those are the things that when we talk about the relationship, that single impact experience is a huge blow to it. So which is why, if in your business, if you listening in your business, if your major customer experience relies on those single impact, that single point of contact, then the retention requirements for those positions should be your number one priority. You should be focusing on employee retention over customer retention because your employee retention is the key to your customer retention,
Right.
right? But then, kind of to contrast that, there's businesses that operate with like retail or food service, where it's usually not about a single experience. It's usually more about like, multiple customer interactions um, outside the extreme. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of it takes a lot of customer interactions with different people to kind of have that impact. So it's almost like there's a collective of employees have the impact on the customer experience. And I think, so again, knowing that value proposition, is it a single impact or is it a collective impact, is something that is an important consideration as well.
Yeah. And single versus collective, I'm with you. Retail, I agree. Food service, not so much.
No?
No, because think about the impact of a so if I'm going into a retail environment, I'm buying a new shirt, and
Hmm.
I have a negative interaction with a an employee there. It may make me reconsider, or it's probably not going to change my purchasing decision if I've already decided that I'm buying a shirt. It
Mm.
it might
Yeah.
so I get that.
Yeah.
But with food service,
Hmm.
if I'm sitting down to a meal and I have a negative interaction with the person who is with the waiter, waitress, that has a much more direct and significant impact on the customer experience than maybe retail. So,
Okay. Yeah.
anyways, I
Yeah.
the single versus collective is spot on. I think
Right.
the retail example is spot on. I think it might depend on the I mean, in a fast food environment, a single negative experience may not have as direct, But I mean, it also maybe it's, if depends on the what is the value proposition, right? With fast food, it's fast and cheap and unhealthy.
Well, cheap.
Cheap. Well, at one time it was. I don't not so much anymore. But
Well,
if you're
yeah.
right, so maybe but if
Yep.
you're
No, that's fair.
setting expectations of a like world-class dining experience and
Mm.
the interaction is subpar, that's going to have a much bigger
Yeah.
um
Okay.
impact. So
Yep.
the how you position your value proposition may have an element to do with that as well.
Yeah, no, that all that's actually a really good point because I mean, like, it's kind of good to kind of list different types of, what's single, what's collective. The other one, there's a third one too, which is about the kind of impact of product quality. So you were kind of saying
Right.
with software, it's kind of like, the software quality is kind of the main impact of customer experience. I would agree with you. The your dev team, those types of things. But also think about manufacturing, right? It's about, the employees don't have any impact on the customer experience because they're not customer facing employees, but it's the quality, the consistency, the reliability of access to the products that is fundamental to the employee experience. So I mean, so there is that third element too, that there's kind of, like we say, there's kind of these three types of value proposition for businesses. There's a single impact, there's the collective impact, and then there's kind of the quality impact.
Hmm.
And how your customer retention, or sort is affected by those three, is kind of really what is the impact, or what is the connection between employee retention and customer retention. In a single impact, we're talking bus drivers, we're talking like, teachers, we're talking like, anyone that has someone's job is to provide face-to-face or consistent, they're the main connection between you and the
Hmm.
business. Huge impact. When it comes to collective impact, it's about, again, if I would agree with you based on where the proposition lies. But again, if the expectation is you deal with multiple customers, or sorry, multiple employees in a small and superficial kind of way, then it would take, then that collective impact impacts the value proposition. Whereas when it's about kind of when it's about quality impact, it's about, having reliable employees who are producing quality software, quality products, or whatever it is, quality transportation, in order to kind of make sure that you're feeling that your impact is about the reality of what you've experienced by receiving the product reliably, high quality. So so the answer is kind of like, it depends on which of those three things you have. But my advice would be, if anyone that's interested in this connection between customer retention and employee retention, is to be kind of clear, well, who delivers our value proposition? Is it through
Yeah.
single impact? Is it through collective impact? Or is it through kind of quality impact? So yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
cool. All right. Um, so I think I'll just kind of do a really kind of quick summary. This has been a pretty good conversation. Anything else you want to add before I do?
No, I'm good.
All right. So the first question was, what do you do when the founder is too stressed to invest in solving business issues? Well, largely we talked about that the answer to this kind of thing is that they need to develop kind of comfort and confidence in the areas that they may be experiencing the challenge in, if it's outside their domain specific skill set, and having some kind of comfort and confidence with the financial planning, forecasting, and management so they can invest, whether that's time, effort, or energy. But it's something that, this is kind of a symptom of the technical founder paradox. So knowing, and also a symptom of kind of the transformation fatigue. So I recommend, if this is a question that really connected with you, to check out those two episodes, which I'll put in the show notes. Next question was, how do you build trust with employees? Well, a lot of it is realizing that most trust erodes slowly over time because of the expectations around, we need to read people's minds, and inconsistency is kind of how we are allowed to kind of show our employees direction or whatever. But those are kind of the two fundamental issues. If you really want to build trust with employees, processes are going to be a huge way to do that, if they're transparent, if they remove guesswork, and if they eliminate inconsistency. So that's where you're going to want to start. And then last was what's the connection between customer retention and employee retention? Well, really, it was about the idea of where's your value proposition coming from? Who delivers it? And is it that your customer model, your employee relation model is with a single impact where one person has a huge impact on 80% of the value of your company is provided through that one person, like a service industry or whatever? Is it a where there's a collective impact on your value proposition through things like, retail or fast food is kind of a good example of where multiple employees kind of make up that experience? Or is it through a kind of a quality impact where it's about employees making sure that there's good, reliable quality of product, and that's what is the most common experience that you have with that company. Knowing which of those three things is your kind of model will help really drive home the point of how important employee retention is to your customer retention. All right. So that about does it for us. For a full archive of the podcast and access to the video version hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.